When history judges a great power, it rarely focuses on the battlefield. It looks instead at the balance sheet. Every empire, no matter how vast its reach or how strong its legions, eventually hits a wall that no army can conquer: the arithmetic of debt. Today, global debt has surpassed an unimaginable $300 trillion. It is a figure so immense, so detached from actual global productivity, that it can no longer be repaid through traditional means. The system, built on perpetual borrowing, has reached its mathematical limit. We are now standing at the edge of the financial reckoning. The debt will be dealt with. The question is not if the music stops, but how the massive global ledger will be cleared. History offers only three brutal, bitter paths to resolve this kind of impossible debt burden. Three poisons, and every nation, from Rome to the United States, is forced to pick one. The three paths to collapse are inflation, austerity, or default, and all three are already in play. The Great Debt Paradox. For decades, we mistook borrowing for prosperity. After the 2008 financial crisis, central banks across the world faced a moment of truth. They chose the path of least resistance: inflation. They printed trillions, a process called quantitative easing, and slashed interest rates to near zero, making debt free for governments and corporations. This decision was designed to save the system, but it buried the future in $300 trillion of new liability. Now, that choice has matured into its unavoidable consequences. Inflation, once dismissed as transitory, is roaring back, forcing rates to spike. Suddenly, the debt that was free to service is crushing national budgets. Nations are spending more on interest payments than on defense or education. When the system runs out of tricks, when rates cannot drop lower and governments cannot borrow infinitely, the choices become stark and politically agonizing. Let us examine the three poisons.
Path 1. Inflation, the silent poison. Inflation is the most elegant, stealthy form of theft in financial history. It is the silent tax levied without consent, a deliberate policy designed to reduce the real value of the state's colossal debt. The government repays its debts with cheaper, diluted money, transferring the cost of its recklessness onto the backs of savers, pensioners, and fixed-wage earners. The historical blueprint for this is laid bare by collapsing empires. The Roman precedent. When the Roman Empire needed to fund endless wars and a bloated bureaucracy, emperors chose currency debasement. They literally mixed base metals like copper into the silver denarius. A coin that was once 95% pure silver under Augustus plummeted to less than 5% silver by the 3rd century. This was inflation by stealth. The face value stayed the same, but the purchasing power evaporated. The state turned itself into a counterfeiter, secretly stealing wealth from every citizen's pocket. The Weimar Warning. Fast forward to Weimar Germany in 1923. Saddled with impossible war debts, the government fired up the printing press. The mark wasn't inflating, it was evaporating. Prices doubled, tripled, and then multiplied daily. Workers were paid twice a day so they could rush their wages to the store before the money became worthless. Families burned banknotes for heat because coal was more expensive. The middle class was financially wiped out overnight. The modern echo. Fiat and Cantillon. Today, we do not chip silver from coins. We print digital trillions with a keystroke. We call it fiat currency, money backed by nothing but faith. This process operates via the Cantillon effect. New money flows first to the financial elite, Wall Street, major banks, and asset owners. They buy up stocks and real estate before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to ordinary citizens as a raise, prices have already soared. The citizen receives the inflation. The elite receives the wealth. Inflation is the quiet path to collapse. It avoids riots, but it destroys the social contract, rewarding speculation and punishing prudence. It ensures that your savings must slowly die to keep the state's debt machine functioning.
Path 2. Austerity, the political poison. When inflation fails to adequately erase the debt, or when foreign creditors lose faith, governments must resort to austerity. Austerity is the brutal process of imposing immense suffering on the domestic population to satisfy external creditors. It is the choice to cut spending, freeze wages, slash pensions, and raise taxes dramatically. Austerity looks responsible on paper, a nation finally living within its means. But in practice, it is a devastating political poison that rips apart the social fabric and crushes populations. The IMF playbook, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, became the global enforcer of this path. When struggling nations like Argentina or Mexico faced debt crises, the IMF stepped in with rescue loans, but only on the condition of implementing severe austerity measures. Argentina's chain. In 2001, Argentina defaulted on $100 billion of debt. The IMF response was the classic playbook: cut public spending, freeze wages, and devalue the peso. Instead of recovery, poverty soared, riots erupted, and Argentina's middle class was shattered. The nation remained locked in a perpetual cycle of debt and renegotiation, losing sovereignty long before it lost money. Austerity turns rescue into dependence, keeping nations on a financial leash. Greece's lost generation. The fall of Greece in the 2010s demonstrated that this path is not confined to emerging markets. After years of overspending and hiding the true scale of its debt within the Eurozone, Greece needed massive bailouts. The required austerity measures gutted pensions and slashed jobs, sending the economy into a deep, painful recession that cost a generation their future. Austerity is the path chosen when the government decides that social stability is less important than satisfying its creditors. It is the path of crushing discipline, leading to protests, stagnation, and political chaos.
Path 3. Default, the violent reset. The third path is default. This is the moment when a government refuses to pay its debt obligations, declaring, "We can't pay." This decision is politically suicidal domestically and financially catastrophic globally, as it triggers a full, chaotic systemic reset. Sovereign defaults in history. When Mexico defaulted in 1982, announcing, "We can't pay our debt," panic spread throughout Latin America, triggering the global debt crisis of the 1980s. Markets freeze instantly. Borrowing stops, the economy crashes, and foreign investors flee. Spain, despite controlling the world's silver supply, defaulted 4 times in 40 years in the 16th century because of its financial overextension. Each default destroyed trust, leading to currency debasement and terminal decline. The U.S. default scenario. If a smaller nation defaults, the shock is regional. If the United States were to default on its $34 trillion debt, the consequences would shake the entire global system. The U.S. dollar is the backbone of global finance, used for oil trade, the petrodollar, and held as reserves worldwide. A U.S. default would collapse trust in treasury bonds, cause interest rates to spike globally, and trigger market panic that could rival 1929 or 2008, but with no safe haven left for investors to run to. Default is the violent, sudden reset. It liquidates old claims, but it replaces them with chaos, often leading to currency collapse, political upheaval, and fragmentation of the global order.
The unavoidable choice. Which poison? The modern reality is that we are not choosing just one path. We are cycling through all three. After 2008, central banks chose mass inflation, QE zero rates. The result, asset bubbles and soaring living costs, the silent tax. Now, to fight the inflation they created, central banks are forced to hike rates, pushing indebted governments toward austerity, cutting budgets to service debt. We are already seeing the early signs of this in struggling U.S. states, European economies, and emerging markets clinging to IMF lifelines. The risk is that if austerity fails, or if a major nation faces a debt ceiling crisis, it might choose default, triggering the complete chaotic reset. The math doesn't care about American exceptionalism. The pattern doesn't care about political rhetoric. When debt outpaces growth, systems break. Rome's final warning. The Roman financial system did not end in fire. It ended in substitution. When the debased coins failed, people turned to barter, food, and land. When the state failed, they turned to local power structures. When belief failed, they turned to real value. History offers a crucial, simple lesson. You cannot spend more than you earn forever. You cannot print prosperity. And you cannot debase your currency without destroying your empire. The modern world runs on the illusion that digital numbers equal real wealth. But when that illusion cracks, whether by inflation, austerity, or default, the only things that survive are those that cannot be printed away. Real assets, productive skills, gold, and networks of trust. We are choosing our poison now. The winners will be those who understood the equation early. The victims will be those still believing the official story of stability. History has already written the script. The question is whether you are prepared for the final act.